Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the I Am 1-2 podcast with your host, Christopher Cohn. With me, as always, is my co-pilot, my friend, my producer, the man that makes this all happen. Dan the Man is in studios, everybody. Say hello to the fine peeps out there, Dan.
Hello, everyone. I hope everybody's doing well today.
We are so glad to be back with you. We took a couple of weeks off because we had some in the can, so we try to get ahead of the curve there. So that's a good point to bring up. If you have any questions that you've sent into the podcast and you haven't heard them yet, stay tuned. They're probably on a later episode, and we've just filmed so many that it hasn't caught up yet. So having said that, send your questions to IAM12 at the IAM12 the word recovery at gmail.com. And at the last part of this portion of this program, we will answer your questions and address whatever concerns you might have about your journey in recovery. Speaking of which, that is why we're here today. We are about all things recovery. And you might be wondering, well, what does that mean? It means that we live in a world that is damaging us on a daily basis. We are being made sick from so many influences, from so many different directions that I think we've lost track of just how much is coming at us all day long. And over time, a little hair in my mouth, over time that tends to break down anybody. And recovery is about getting these tools so that you can at least be aware of what's happening. You can make changes, you can use new tools, and have the life that you want to have on this planet. And unfortunately, a lot of people are just being buffeted like a boat with no rudder on it because they don't have any tools and they don't have any kind of program. So even though we use a lot of the 12 steps tools in here and the wisdom from that program, we are about all things recovery, and we'd like to hear from you. So if you're on your own path, let us know what you're doing out there to recover from this sick world, because it doesn't have to dominate you. It's literally just like a matrix we're all living in, and we've accepted it that it's reality, but not necessarily. So let's be open-minded to that stuff. I didn't get my journey of recovery until I had to hit a bottom, and that's not necessary always too. People think, well, do you have to go through a lot of pain for change? Not always. Just depends on desire. That's what Bill Wilson said we need. If you have the desire, you too can find a new life for yourself on this planet. So if you looked at the placard for the video, you already know what this topic is. So we're going to ease into it a little bit slowly today because it's a little outside the box, but it happens to be one of my favorite things to ponder on and to talk about. And when you do, people give you weird looks. And I actually know why. We'll hold on to that one in a second. But they sort of go, what are you, some sort of conspiracy weirdo? Or what is that stuff? Or I don't know about that. We're going to talk about programming today. We're going to talk about what makes us who we are today. We're going to talk about how we got here. And then we're going to talk about some tools to help you unwind this programming that you have that maybe is bad. Maybe you have some really awful programming that is causing you to repeat these patterns in your life that are counterproductive, and they're not really working out for you. So hang with me because I've got my little notes, and we're going to try and get through this in a cohesive manner. But it's a wide open topic. It's not like an ABC topic where I can just go, well, now you do this and now you do that. So I'm going to try to break this down for us. So the brain is the most amazing mechanism we own as a human being. It's an organ in your body, but it literally is the most amazing product. I mean, sure, the heart does what it does. I'm not putting it down by any means. The liver, we all need that. But the brain, the way it has evolved and the way it has learned to grow and adapt is the reason why we're still on this earth. And you've got to realize everything that we're doing today as creatures, that's why I'm starting here at the beginning. Every single choice and decision we are doing today is based on hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of years, all in the name of our survival. What was going to keep our species here on the planet, what was going to keep you alive as an individual. And the brain, if we had not had that ability to adapt, neural adaptivity, we would not be here. We would not have made it as a species, okay? So we've all heard the story, particularly back in high school, maybe junior high school, of Pavlov's dog, the landmark experiment where Pavlov decided to take this poor animal, and every time he would feed it some steak, he would ring a bell. And he wanted to condition the animal to associate the sound of the bell with the smell and the taste of the steak. And eventually the experiment was to prove conditioning. That by the time he got done doing this to the dog long enough, he could take away the steak and the meat, ring the bell, and the dog's mouth would salivate automatically without the presence of the meat present. Now think about that. Think about the power of that involuntary response. It could make you salivate, and there's no food present for a dog. Okay. Now, what happens to us as human beings is we are living animals, and we forget that. And I think it's a cause of a lot of our woes in modern society, that we've lost our connection with planet Earth. We've lost our connection with nature. We live behind walls of glass and steel, and we don't even have to experience the weather unless we go outside. And we become so insulated, our ego has told us that we're different, that somehow we're immune and we're above conditioning and or training, if you prefer those two words to programming. It all means the same thing in my book. But conditioning and training, hence, i.e. programming, is what's creating your neural circuits in your brain, and is going to determine how you're going to react in situations you take yourself to and put yourself in. As I've said before in here, we do have free will, and you control the brain. The brain does not control you, except for this very thing of training and programming, okay? So let's say I decide to go somewhere. That's my decision. I go there. When I put myself in that situation, then the brain is going to react to try and figure out what it relates to and what it would normally do in that situation, and it's going to try to adapt. And then that's where the brain has the control. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So when we're talking about conditioning and training and habits, and we all know how hard habits are to break, especially the bad ones. I heard a speaker one time say, how come good habits are so hard to keep and bad habits are so hard to break? I don't know that answer to that, but does seem to be a truism. I heard a story one time in my training somewhere along the road that the power of conditioning, if you have a dog that you have trained to go outside to do its business at 11 o'clock every night, and let's say you have a change in your work schedule one day where suddenly you're not going to be there at 11 o'clock. Guess what's going to be waiting for you when you get home? Probably a nice little dog turd present on the dining room table, just to let you know that the dog's not happy that you weren't there to let it out. Now, when 11 o'clock comes and you're not there, and the dog gets up and walks over to the window at the door and stares outside, does that dog have a wristwatch where it's looking and it notices it's 11? Does that dog have the TV on where it notices the news come on, so it must be time to go outside? Are you even home? No. The brain has adapted that training and conditioning to such a power that the dog automatically, even from a dead sleep, the dog will wake up and say it's time to go out. And if you don't somehow attend to that, you're going to have a really smelly, messy house in the end, and it's going to be a disaster. Well, guess what? Our brains are just like the dogs. We're living animals. We are susceptible to our conditioning, to our training. And I remember I went to this other training with one of the top neuroscientists of the country, and I've been exposed to some of the greatest minds that exist. They're way beyond what I can comprehend. I try to hang with them with some of the scientific terms for a minute, and then they'll lose me. They'll take a left turn, and I'll be like, huh? What? I actually heard Sam Harris, I think, say that the neuroscientists are way more hard to understand than even the most crazy computer people or anything like that, because the brain is that complicated. But what this trainer said in this was, he said that the brain is the greatest supercomputer that exists. He said AI may never, ever really be able to come up to what the brain can do in terms of multitasking and adaptation. It may. And I know that's what they think and hope it's going to do. But this is what he said back in probably it was 2003 or so. And so when he said the greatest supercomputer that exists, I immediately equated training and conditioning with programming. Because what is a computer? A computer is nothing without the software that you put on it. You understand me? You get a computer at home and you have a basic hard drive. If Best Buy or whatever company you got it from has not preloaded software on there for you to use it, you're going to turn it on and have nothing to do. No Facebook, no Microsoft Word, no internet. Those programs have not been preloaded, right? So today, what I want to do is I want to kick around this idea about what are the programs that have been preloaded into me throughout my my lifetime, with me knowing it a lot of times and with me not knowing it a lot of times. And what about this idea that maybe some of the software I've got is malware? You ever heard that term? That means really bad software that may be damaging your system. And I see a lot of people out there doing crazy behaviors on a daily basis, and I'm thinking their malware is really acting up, or they've got some viruses in their system. I mean, think about this, folks. None of us sit down, unless you work a program like the 12 steps and do inventory. None of us sits down and does a virus scan on our brain. None of us sits down and does a scan disk on our system to see if we've got any blips in our hard drive that need to be repaired. Do you? Of course not. How many of us even meditate, which is another form of taking a moment to reboot your hard drive? Or nap, as my friend Dan, /meditation nap, same thing in our book. So I want to kick around that idea because, it was Plato that said that man was born with tabula rasa. Tabula rasa means a blank slate, and that's what they used to use in the days of the Greeks when they were teaching class. They would have a slate, and they would use chalk, and they would on the board and show them. And we actually still do that today. That's where that comes from in classrooms. But this idea that it's a blank slate. Now, I think any good neuroscientist / child development person would tell you there are basic personality traits that everybody has as part of your gene pool. We have this deal where people might be more oriented towards optimism. We have this thing where some other people might be more orientated towards pessimism. That's been studied extensively, and you can look up the studies on that. They're still not sure about it, but they are suspecting that it is a little pre-wired for that.
Yeah, my audio, I sit here and get everything set up, and I got so many things to turn on and off, and I forgot to mute my one computer.
That's all right, man. Your programming was set to go off, and it went off.
And it did.
This is kind of the example of what we're talking about today, that I have absolutely no control, that if it's set to go off, it's going to go off unless I change it. So let's start with some basics when we're talking about what was I preloaded with, what do I actually have as part of my, because, that's argument of nature versus nurture. And again, I'm just kicking these ideas around to get you to expand your mind a bit, so I might bounce around a little bit. But nature versus nurture, like, well, how much of this was me as who Christopher is as a person? And how much of it was influenced by my parents, or how much of it was influenced by my schools. And my argument is that none of us got the opportunity before we were born to choose the family we were going to be born into. You didn't get to choose the town you were going to be born into, nor did you get to choose the country with the traditions you were going to be born into. You get to choose your family traditions. You did not get to choose your family's religion, politics, beliefs or non-beliefs, racism, you name it. All that was foisted on you at birth the moment the doctor smacked your ass. You're just thrown right into this teacher system. And those of you that watch the episode on teachers, you understand what I'm saying. They're just there. And you're like, as a child, a sponge. Every single child development scientist and therapist has taught me that child's minds are sponges. They suck in everything. And if you have a child, because you can be in one side of the room having a conversation with your friend very quietly, and the child's playing seems totally occupied, and you accidentally let a curse word slip, and all of a sudden the child repeats it, and you're like, I didn't think you heard that. They heard it all right. They absorb all that stuff. Problem is, as we are absorbing all that as children, we don't have any basis for discretion or discrimination or to discern what's true from false. We haven't developed our brains yet. The child just takes it in and says, it must be absolute God-given truth. So for instance, here's a truth to a child. You grow up in a crazy family system, that child believes that every family is like that. You grew up in a great family system. You may have no understanding of what it's like to grow up on the streets because you've never seen it, experienced it, until you grow up and you begin to expand your mind, and your mind can handle other perspectives. So your worldview, that's what we call it in therapy. What is your worldview? Is being shaped from every single person around you, plus the media, plus television, plus all the influences in your life, your peers at school, what they're wearing, what is acceptable, what's not, And it's so arbitrary. Just by a zip code number, what they're going to be wearing at one school will be cool, and what they're wearing at another school is not cool. And again, that's going to sway you one way. That's going to put the pressure on you. Well, I should go with this crowd. And was that me doing that, or was that influenced by my programming? You understand what I'm saying here? So the whole goal of recovery and the whole goal of therapy, I had a brand new patient come in today, and they were a little burned out on the therapy process because they've been sent there many times by their employer, and they'd never been in my group, though. And I always tell people when they come in my group, well, you might want to just wait a minute because it might have to be a different experience in here. But I said, well, I'm glad you asked the question about what was therapy's purpose and why are we doing this. I said, well, this is simplifying it, but this is my take on it. I, as a therapist, try to bring all of our unconscious, automated behaviors from the back of our brainstem, where it's all buried and we're just doing it on automatic pilot, just like the wild animals out there acting on primitive instinct. It's just automatically, I brush my teeth every day, I drive my car the same way to work. This is all automated behavior, and scary enough, the neuroscientists will say that we do up to 80 to 90% of everything every day on automated behavior. Part of that is habit. Part of that is because we're trying to be efficient and get it done. Our brain's trying to learn how to do it better, faster, quicker. So we're just doing it without thinking about it. You're thinking about something else when you're driving. You're doing something else when you're brushing your teeth and driving. Same deal. It's automatic behavior. But the problem is that therapy wants to bring that out and bring it to your frontal cortex, which is your executive functioning. And if we talk about something in group that day that rings a bell with somebody and really touches them, later that evening with their family, that habit or that pattern may come out in their interactions. And they will actually have a chance, a small chance, to step back and say, I'm doing that thing. I'm doing the thing they were talking about in group. No, there it is. That's the character defect. That's the thing I'm doing. And if they hadn't had that day in group, they would have just done it and not given it a second thought. That is the danger of programming if it's unexamined. It just continues and continues and continues. And as I say in my book, it's always easy to see in other people and almost impossible to see in ourselves. Whenever I'm working with someone, they can always bring up a family member or a friend that say, I don't know why they keep picking the same people in relationships. I don't know why they keep doing the same stuff. They keep bringing, I don't know, it's just disgusting. And we can't see ourselves doing that, okay? But again, if I've never been shown it, brought it to my executive functioning, been given tools to change it, I'm going to repeat it. And, recovery to me, the tragic thing is there's so many people in this world that never know about recovery, never get any tools, and they just repeat their patterns to their deathbed, and then they're wondering, what was life all about? Was that all there is? What if I could have done this or that? Because I'm here to tell you, man, as I've worked with so many people over the years, programming determines where you work. It will determine who you pick partner. It will determine who you how much money you will be able to tolerate or not tolerate. I'll give you an extreme example. Just about every shark on Shark Tank has said that they came from a background where they didn't have money or they were financially insecure as a child, and that gave them the drive to become a billionaire. That is programming. Now, we would say that's good programming because you got to be a billionaire and you're on Shark Tank. But think about it. Did they choose that path? Or was that somehow influenced by their programming, and maybe they could have or wanted to be an artist that didn't make a lot of money, but they were happy because they painted. They seem happy. I'm not saying they're not, but it's just food for thought. Am I on my path, or am I on the path that was dictated to me? A couple of other questions we can ask ourselves. Why do I do it this way, or why do I do it that way? A very simple one coming up here is Christmas. Some families celebrate on Christmas Day. Some families celebrate on Christmas Eve. And when you get married or in a new relationship, you're going to have to negotiate with your partner if they celebrate at a different time than you do. But again, to them, that's normal. Open our gifts on Christmas Eve. To me, that's crazy because we always did it on Christmas Day. Why would you ruin Christmas Day and now there's nothing to look forward to? I don't understand it. But to them, that was normal, right? So getting the chance to really evaluate and question these things. I've done a lot of work over 40 years plus of recovery, and I'm still finding things out. Just stunning things that just, we're not completely blind, right? We're intelligent human beings, so we can have a suspicion and some thoughts about some things. But all of a sudden, when you're in recovery, this thing will congeal, and you'll be like, oh my God, it really is that. I suspected it was part of that, but it really is that. So I'll give you some examples that have sort of been coming to my mind lately. when I was a child growing up, I had this extreme passion to get into theater and movies. And I loved movies, and I loved the whole romance of the movie star. And my heroes were Pacino and De Niro and Hoffman. And some people had baseball or football heroes, and they didn't have trading cards for celebrities, but I would have gotten them because those were my guys. Now, I actually gave everything I could to go to the theater art school and to eventually get accepted into a very exclusive university. And I went through a lot of hell to get in these universities. If I told you the whole process, you'd be like, it's a miracle they picked anybody out of 1,000 people, accepting 30, 20 men and 10 women. So I look back at that and say, why did I put myself through all that? Was it necessary? Is that what I wanted? And I actually have come to the conclusion, I'm thinking now it was more influenced from the fact that that was when my parents paid the most attention to me, when I was the star, when I was getting that attention. And the bigger the part, the bigger the accolades, the more my dad was there. As a drunk, my dad seemed to only be there when I was having all the women around me and getting all the attention and everything. So that's what I would do. And I was ultimately seeking my dad's approval, maybe more than I was seeking a career in the movies. And later in recovery, if you've heard my story, I got a chance to go out to Hollywood and pursue that. And I found out this is really not the place for me. I mean, God bless California, it's great, but Hollywood and Los Angeles, we'll get into that now. It's a strange business, and it's not the romance you think it is. It's a cutthroat, brutal, money-making. Theater would have been more my cup of tea. But again, it had to be the movies. And so even when it came to choice of university, I got accepted into this exclusive university, and Wesley Snipes was one of my classmates. So that gives you an idea that I must have been pretty good to get in there. And I also got accepted into Carnegie Mellon in Philadelphia and in Pennsylvania. And I think today that might have been a better fit for me, a 4-year university where there was balance instead of this intense training where you're up at 5 and working till 10 at night. And it was everything you can imagine, like you're training for the Olympics, basically. That's the way this school was. It was like Juilliard. If anybody knows anything about Juilliard, it's only for the not a faint of heart. It's a very intense environment. And of course, at that time, that's where my alcoholism addiction showed up for the first time. Isn't that interesting? So again, something that so profoundly impacted my future destiny. Was that my choice really to go there? I was convinced. You could have put me on a lie detector and I would have fought you and said, yes, I'm going there. Because they said you can go to the other school. No, I want to be in New York. I want to do this. I want to do this. Was it? And that's what I'm inviting you to ask about your own life today. Was it my choice? And do I want to make sure I don't repeat those patterns in the future of making bad choices, not based on what I really want, but maybe just more on my programming? Now, another one that came to me recently, and, difficult to share in some ways, but I want to do this for the sake of helping anybody out there. So, coming from a dysfunctional family system, well, let's back up a little bit. I work with a lot of people who come from damaged homes with religion and spirituality. And there's a lot, actually. And almost everybody entering AA or NA has some sort of beef with the God stuff from their damage that happened to them during childhood. So that turns them off, and they turn completely away from any kind of spirituality or church or practice in their adult life because of what was done to them. Now, that's a terribly profound decision, again, whether or not you're going to have a spiritual basis to your life that feeds you and sustains you, but it was determined by these assholes that you just didn't like what they said or what they did, right? I got to tell you, in my experience, overwhelming number of atheists and agnostics coming into the recovery are just damaged children. They just got burned by somebody saying or doing something wrong around that topic. And now they're mad, and now they're hurt, and their brain associates all spirituality with what happened to them in the past. But this issue for me was pondering, why don't I have kids? I don't really want kids. I don't really miss not having kids. I enjoy my privacy. I'm a writer. I need quiet. But I think I missed out on that family aspect in this lifetime. And that's okay. I think it hurts my sister a lot more than it does me. I know it does, because she, being a woman, don't want to speak for her, but I just know that she really wishes she had kids. And it just didn't work out, and I won't go into her story, but it was because of damage from childhood that showed up in her marriages. And this is what I'm saying. Now I'm thinking, well, was that really my decision not to have children, or was that more influence from the crap I went through as a kid, and I just don't want to relive that through my kid? And I've heard a lot of people talk about this who are in recovery, say, this idea of having to be 8 again, and will that trigger all my stuff from being 8 again? I don't know. I don't have a full answer to that, but again, it's something I'm pondering at the moment. And I bring it up to expand your mind to really consider different angles of your life about why did I choose that road? Why did I go to this place? Why did I pick that job? Why did I go here? And that's part of recovery. It's not to do it in the sense to be regretful and don't be filled with remorse and look back. We don't want to do that. Instead, we want to use that information to reevaluate where I am today and whether I want to change paths. Now, I'm not planning to have children this late in life. That would be a little extreme on that one. But there's other things you can do, like change jobs or change where you live or how you want to, what's your priorities in life. I love nothing more in recovery than watching people get the bug that all of a sudden they wake up and they go, I don't really like living in the city. Screw this. And they move out to nowhere. And you're like, good on you, man. Or they wake up one day and they say, I really hate the corporate grind. This is not making me happy. It's hurting my recovery. And they just go off and start a chicken farm. Like my old spiritual teacher used to say, your dream might be to have 5 chickens on a chicken farm, but you're happy. And that is the gift of unwinding your programming, is that once you do, what's left is the real you underneath that, for you to be able to implement your true heart, your true authenticity. All right, so how do we do this? Give you a couple of tools to think about. And again, I know this topic's a little bouncy around the place, and I know it's a little thick, but mostly my goal today is just to get you to think. Just ponder. That's all. Just ponder on this stuff. We talked about the inner child a couple of weeks ago, and Dan has told me just this past week that there's something came up in his life that made him ponder the inner child stuff. And that's great. That's what we want to do in this podcast, is just get you. Isn't that more interesting, your day anyway? I mean, what do you think about otherwise? The politics, the sports game, what are you going to have for lunch? Isn't it much more better to have a day where you're pondering your life's fate and journey and destiny? So that's why we're doing all this work. All right. So I think it's really important to identify and pay attention to the voices you hear in your head. I've got a sponsor. I'm going to take a little sippy sip for a second here. I've got this great sponsor named Darren, where whenever I would bring him some stuff I was dealing with, and I'd talk about my inner voice was saying this, or this part of me was doing that, he'd say, well, whose voice from your past do you hear in your head saying that the most? Who can you relate to that would be saying that to you? And at first you'll draw a blank. You'll be like, what? I'm saying it. What are you talking about? And then when you really ponder on it, you can be like, no, wait a minute. I can hear my dad saying things like that to criticize me, or I can hear my mom saying things like that because of expectations, whatever. And now I'm doing it to me. Why am I doing it to me? Because they taught me to. It's my programming. So being able to discover and identify, oh, that's my dad's voice telling me that, or oh, that's my mom's trauma doing that. Give an example. I've had group members who have extreme financial anxiety, and they stress the hell out of money and all this stuff. And it's not even what happened to them. They could have had a great childhood, but guess what? Mom had terrible financial struggles. And because of mom's fear of not having enough money, she overcompensated. So the kids had a great upbringing, but still she transferred that fear of money not being there to the kids. And it just happened by proximity, just being there. That's how deep this programming goes. So again, that's my mom's trauma, that's my dad's voice, that's not me, and that means I can change it. I'm not tied to what their stuff was. I'm not tied to their journey or what they're trying to work out, their karma. That's their journey. All right, so every day in group, that's what I do. I help people to identify, as our friend Travis always loves to say, it's a great saying in recovery, uncover, discover, discard. And so we go on that journey to unwind people's past. And they're always, at first, dubious. Like, why are we talking about this? Because they're always sketchy. It's painful to talk about childhood for addicts and alcoholics. And, they're like, oh, what's it all about? And guess what happens slowly? They wake up. They have bells go off. I see their eyes light up, and they want to participate. And that builds group cohesion almost better than any other topics we do in group. When we're talking about family, we're talking about upbringing, we're talking about the past and childhood, that there's so much relatability, and it just bonds the group more than anything else. So we want to unwind that stuff, and then we want to make the connections. So I'm unwinding it, saying this is where it comes from. It comes from my dad believing this or that. And then I want to connect it to how is that showing up in my life today? How do I do some of that? So I'm very careful with money as well, which I don't think is a bad trait necessarily. And I'm not anal about it by any means. I do spend, unfortunately. But I can see that the financial instability in my family growing up causes me to dot that extra I and check the books twice and make sure that everything's in order, because you can tell me, and I know I'm on top of my bills. I handle my shit. Which, again, is not a bad quality for an alcoholic. We usually don't take care of our stuff. But, again, I can see where it comes from, the identifying and unwinding where it comes from, and the connecting to what I'm doing today. Now, here's the really good news. We have this thing called plasticity that you have heard of probably, but maybe not. And it's a breakthrough in brain science that only happened in the past 15, 20 years or so. Now, check this out. This is how current and how fast neurobrain science is changing for us to understand what makes us do what we do. Because I swear to you, as I said in the episode on inner child, I'm going to these trainings for my licensure, and every single latest research on how the brain works for therapy and how to help people is showing us it's all about childhood. It's all about childhood. It's all about childhood. It's all about childhood. Listen to Gabor Mate on YouTube. He will tell you it's all about childhood. It's all about childhood. And it's showing up in adult life, okay? So I was in my initial beginnings of training and getting my master's degree for social work in 2001, 2002. And they were saying just that recently to today that, well, pretty much by the age 18 to 24, the brain is set. You pretty much learned everything and set, what you're going to be and what you're going to do, and it's just set. And even then, I didn't know if I've agreed with that, because I'm arguing in my head, well, what about free will? What about this or that? Well, guess what? They came out and said, whoops, sorry, we were wrong. Actually, your brain changes and grows and adapts to the day you take your last breath. So Dan has an elderly parent. I have an elderly parent. Their brain, no matter how beat up it might be by aging, still has the ability to create neural connections and to learn new things. Isn't that astonishing? Yes. Maybe they won't remember them, but they can learn them. That's a joke, because my mom's struggling with memory right now. And that takes me on a sidetrack. CBS Sunday Morning this past week, Jane Fonda gave a presentation with this aging expert she works with. And the aging expert says, we've learned a lot of things about how to help you age healthily with the brain. But guess what the number one thing is we found out a person can do as they grow older? You will never guess. I had no idea. Art classes. Art classes. It's been shown it provides everything an older person needs to keep their brain active. It's creative. It challenges them. They're meeting new people. They're building new relationships. They're having new experiences, and it's interactive. Okay. And we also know on the opposite side of the spectrum, an elderly person that closes the doors and sits at home watching Fox or MSNBC all day, they decline quickly. And I mean quickly. So neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to create new neural connections and to build new brain cells and to build new neurons, so that when you're exposed to new things, you can learn it and engage your brain and add to. It's not a minus, it's an add to and add to. And that's our hope for recovery. God forbid if I had all this programming, and what if I'm stuck this way the rest of my damn life? I know a lot of people feel that way. I felt that way when I was using, but that was just because I didn't have any new tools. I didn't know there was a way to change. So what happens? Dan will tell you this when he shares in just a minute here. We come in these meetings, we see a guy that looks set in his ways, man. I mean, he is set. He's set in his ways about women. He's set in his ways about his ex-wife. He's set in his ways about his job and about his drinking, and he has no hope whatsoever. And we foist all these new tools on him. Here, try this, try this, try this. And he doesn't want to do it, but he's desperate enough to do it. That same dude in 6 months' time gets up, and especially if he's done the 12 steps, is a completely different man. I mean, to the point where it's stunning. You have to do a double take. Sometimes I'll see people get their first year. Or let me use an example. We had a guy, I won't mention his name, I'll say he was Fred. He's a big guy. Dan met him first, led him to our group, and he struggled with relapse over and over and over and over. And I really didn't know if Fred was going to make it. And now he's sober like 2 or 3 months. And the dude got up 2 weeks ago and gave a presentation on a step that had me almost fall out of my seat for how coherent and good it was. I mean, you just don't see that. And his brain was like, must get the next drink. That's all he thought about 2 months prior. And now there he is, participating and on the path and a completely new person. And so that's our hope. And for us that choose recovery, and you too can find recovery, there's a 12-step meeting for everything. And we are working to create 12-step meetings for just the average people. It provides therapy that's free. It provides experience and exposure to others, being with a group, that sense of community, all those things that also help with aging, that'll help with you changing your brain. And the number one thing that really touched me today, I was listening to our good friend Bob D. He's a great AA speaker, and he has this quote where he says, "What made me well was you sharing about you at the meeting taught me about me." You talking about you taught me about me. You weren't preaching at me. You weren't telling me what to do. You were just talking about your experience. And I had a chance to sit back and identify. Not only do we identify, but we sit in these groups all over the world and we share experiences and we learn from them and we gather a toolkit from it. My good friend Dan over there picked up the quote from one of our speakers. Experience is not my greatest teacher. Other people's experience is my greatest teacher. So if I go to a meeting and I see a guy that did it really wrong, I have a chance to head off my programming and say, I can see how his programming put him in that position with that woman, and he shouldn't have done that, and now he has a disease. And so I can go, I sure look at my program about why I think I need to be with her, and maybe that's more my dad's stuff about why I need to be with her and my ego and proving something to the guys rather than my real honest heart needing to be with her. You understand what I'm saying? I see so many people fall into relationships and then later go, why am I with this person? Why did I choose this? It makes no sense. Well, I hate to tell you, go back and unwind the clock. It's in childhood somewhere. So I hope that helps. Again, deep topic, one of my favorite topics because it's just not talked about enough. Maybe Dan can fill in the blank here. I think our friend Sam Harris, the neuroscientist, has talked about programming. They might use different terms for it. And I know maybe Joe Rogan's had a couple of podcasts on it, but they just don't seem to go in depth, and that's kind of what we did today, if it made any sense at all, like as I always say. So let's get Dan in here and get a little side views, and plus he'll stimulate my brain to add one or two other pieces. Anything touch you from today's podcast, or any thoughts on this stuff about changing our brain, our programming, our training, our habits?
Well, as I say on each one of these episodes, I get this wonderful seat at the other side of the table, and yes, it does stimulate all kinds of thoughts. I have a whole page full of notes, and probably won't have time to touch on them all.
Love it.
But I just first want to start out with when you're talking about that, what's he say, huge displacements and rearrangements happen, that rearranging our mind and our thinking from doing this work, and that this thing is just it will completely transform you. It even in a short amount of time, and it has staying power. It keeps on doing that if you stay in it. There's not that's one of the fun. At some point, I thought there was like this goal of just stopping my old behaviors, and if I did that, I'd be okay. But it goes, that was really my only goal at that point in time. But then you start seeing how these programming, if you got good teachers, like the episode from last week, or from a few weeks ago, you can unwind this stuff and begin to do some serious change in your behaviors and something, and get to a being that you're happy with, and begin, because those old programmings keep you unhappy most of the time.
We're stuck.
Yeah, stuck. Yeah. And you're just in this stuck in a rut and can't get out. And unless you get something to stimulate some new thought, you won't have any choice but to sit there and stay in that rut to go along and along. And the older you get, there is some validity to the old dog, new tricks thing. It is harder to teach an old dog new tricks, and we're no different, but we still can, and you still can. You actually can teach an old dog new tricks. And that's the same thing with this neuroplasticity, that we can actually unwind some stuff and begin to change some of these patterns that's defeating us.
Let me touch real quick on
Yep.
what you brought up. So those that haven't read the big book, there's a section in chapter 2 about Carl Jung, who is the father of modern psychiatry. And it's interesting making this connection here. This is the guy that started what we're doing today. But he already suspected this about programming, if you really follow this quote. He was talking about how he had seen success in alcoholics on this one condition. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. He's talking about coming to Jesus moments. Maybe they got hit with the lightning bolt. They're like, ah. He says, to me, these are phenomena, which means I can't explain it. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements, ideas, emotions, and attitudes which once were the guiding forces of the lives of these men are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives began to dominate them.
That's
now,
huge.
That is what we try to do in therapy. And this is what we do with the 12 steps. You see a guy come in and he is convinced that his worldview is correct. And you're just sitting there laughing as an old timer because like everything you think you know is wrong. You're completely wrong about everything. But that's okay. We'll accept it for now. And he's just go through the car wash, man. Do the work. Just go through the car wash. And he comes out and he's like, I see. He's different. Even looking at our friend Vlad the other day, and we got to get him on here, man. Just looking at him at the meeting, I'm like, this is a completely changed dude, man.
Yep, completely.
So I didn't mean to steal your thunder there, but I wanted to put that quote in there.
Yep, yeah, I'm glad you did, because that is a seriously powerful little paragraph there. And then as you dig into it and learn more about it, I think about how many lines I've read in various books that just soared right over them. But then when I get a new set of glasses, so to speak, these words completely change meaning, and boom, you hit something. And yeah, that's one thing cool about the big book. It's always what Scott Lee says. They put wet ink in there. Something's in there. It wasn't in there last time you read it. Whoa, hey, check this out. Because I speak from my, just from my personal experience again. When I got here, I thought, to some extent I wasn't capable of change, that this was just me, like, you had some cross to bear kind of thing, and this was mine, and this is just what I was going to have to do. I was going to work at this place for the rest of my life. While you're talking, and I think about my father, and he did a lot of different things, and it looked unstable to me. I had a feeling of that in my life because there were these periods where my dad was not employed. We always were fine, but one thing I think I learned is that I need to get a long-term career and work at a place the rest of my life, and do that. And when I met you, I told you that I didn't have an engineering degree, but they were employing me as an engineer. So I was stuck, and I had no other options, Christopher. You don't understand. This is going to be my job for the rest of my life. I can't take this experience, and like there's only a handful of people in the world that do this thing we're doing, because there really is. Not very many people build heat recovery steam generators in the world, like maybe 4 people, and some of them are overseas. So I thought I was stuck, and this working this program and working on the path of the 12 steps lead me, realized that wasn't the case, and I didn't even have to try. And that's what you've heard me say it before. If you listen to my podcast, everything that's happened in my life mostly happened organically. I didn't set out to be a woodworker handyman. It just happened. It's kind of like the thing about not wanting alcohol anymore. I can look at some of those words. It says that seems like we're placed in a place of neutrality, that it's not even attractive to you anymore. But that's a lot of things. That's not just alcohol. I was safe and protected, and my life starts unfolding in a completely different way. I like to think about the thing like I remember doing defrags on my computer.
Yeah.
And you'd see it, and they'd put a little graph up there, and you'd have all these little holes and this kind of stuff, and it would sit around, and then everything would settle in the bottom of the graph, and you'd have all this clean space up at the top of it. That's one of the analogies I think about how when you're working the 12 steps and doing this, and it's, the 12 steps opened the door to me to be able to do this. But, like this programming stuff is not really, I mean, it's semi-addressed in there sort of like that, but that's not really thinking about this particular topic. And I rejected it. When I first got here, I rejected that I was programmed. And as my mind opened, I realized just how programmed I was, It was because I was like a jukebox, man. If you pushed 237, Stairway to Heaven played.
That's right.
And if you pushed that button in me, you got this reaction. And I could not do that reaction if it got pushed. And then there's people in your life that realize that button will make you do that. And I don't know that they're really doing it consciously. It's part of their programming probably also. But then you get people in your life that are purposefully pushing that button. I always think of a way I'm programmed in one way, and I get a little giggle out of it because once in a while, I watch a lot of podcasts, and I'll see that there's a guy of has a really full Asian descent. You can tell they're from someplace over there. And then he starts talking with a southern drawl like he's from southern Georgia. And it always knocks me off base because I'm not, I am programmed to think that guy's going to talk in an Asian accent or some way like that.
That's all those stereotypes, too. I mean, throughout the history of film and television, how many stereotypes have we been bombarded with year after year, day after day? And you're going to assume that guy's going to act like this person's going to do this person's going to talk like that. And I love having expectations thwarted whenever you find new things today. It's actually one of the most exciting things about recovery is to find out you were wrong about something and it's totally different than what you thought it was.
Yeah. The story of Buddha, his thing is one of those stories where he was isolated. Like you said, he was in this family system where he was very, very, very privileged. And then he somehow got the nudge to walk out the gates and started seeing stuff that was causing him to question himself. Seeing sick people, he didn't see sick people, poor people, crippled people, and that whole story is almost the same story that at some level or parallel what you were saying about our stuff. That's thousands of years old.
Yeah, they say he became enlightened. Yeah. And then ideally that's what we do in our program. We get this spiritual awakening, but that awakening is like yourself.
Yeah.
My favorite scene in The Matrix is when he goes to see the Oracle, and everybody's like, we're going to take you to see the Oracle. It's going to take you to see the Oracle. And he's expecting it to be this huge, great force like God. And he walks into a woman's kitchen, and it's a woman making cookies for him. And he looks over, and she goes, you know what that sign means? And it's in Latin. And he goes, no, it says, know thyself. Know thyself. That's the whole goal of recovery.
Yeah, it is.
And my argument is, it's okay if you disagree, our whole world is off balance and crazy out there because nobody knows who they are, and they're all acting on what they're being influenced by. Yep. They're not acting out of true, authentic motivations. I'll give you another example, man, that I forgot to bring up. How powerful have they swayed us with programming with the food industry? Let me give you a simple example. Everybody in here has done this. You buy the bag of chips. You taste the first one. It's programmed to set off every neural circuit in your body, so you'll get that bliss point and go, it's great. First bite. And the second one, it's great. Not as great, but it's great. Third bite, it's not as great as that's what. And then you're eating half the bag. And how many times you sat there, half the bag in, and you're still eating, and you say, why am I doing this? Why am I eating this? It's not even good food. The entire junk food industry has been successful because of programming and manipulating the science to hack the brain and attack every part of our brain that's looking for survival, reward, and pleasure. And so next time you do that, ask yourself, well, this isn't a filet mignon. This isn't the best fish I can buy or get. Why am I eating this? Well, and why did I pick it up and put it in my cart when I told myself I wasn't going to be eating that stuff?
Yeah.
I think it's the tip of the iceberg, the way we're just being swayed. How about the example of the person that, we always want to say it's a fringe element, but the guy that gets so deep into conspiracy theories or into programming from one political side or another that they turn against their own family. Now that's just insane. What would cause somebody that's external, an external power, to come in and turn you against your own blood?
Yeah.
That would be an impossible task, I would think, 100 years ago. 100 years ago, they would shoot you and put you in a pine box and get you off the farm. You came in and tried to take somebody from their family. Today, internet reaches right in. Internet reaches in with porn and destroys marriages, and I mean, all that stuff. And you're going to sit here and tell me that you're the decider, you're the chooser, and that nothing influences you? All right, next time you're at the stoplight and you start to smell that waft of McDonald's French fries being pumped out, which is what they do to get you to pull in.
Yep.
See if you can resist pulling in.
And there's something about us that's weird that we don't want, we want to resist that we've been programmed. There's something ego.
I got to have that self-control idea.
I'm driving this train, there's nobody, that didn't have anything to do with this. And like you said, you go your entire life and miss out on like what we have today because you're stuck in thinking you know you best when you don't know you at all.
What did they say? Buddha said the same thing. The beginning of wisdom is admitting that you don't know anything. So everything you think you know and you're convinced of, you've got to be willing to bend just a little bit to say, well, maybe I'll ponder on what you guys are saying. That's all. Yep. That's the beginning of real growth.
Right.
Just listen, take some of it in. That's all.
Begin to have a little bit of an open mind. Just a little.
I mean, let's think about it this way. You and I, varying backgrounds. You grew up with guns. You grew up in a conservative state. You grew up hunting, so guns are natural to you. I grew up around the Vietnam War and protesting and John Lennon and rock and roll. And, it's like the guns were the evil government, and the war machine. And I just had a different view on it. And the cool thing is in recovery, you can change your mind. Christopher has shot guns. They've got pictures. I got a picture of an AK in my hand. Yeah. Again, things I never would have believed and never would have gone for when I first came in. That's not me. That's not me. Well, there's a part of me that sees that it's fun to shoot a gun off every once in a while. There's no big deal with that. It's just being open for change. And this is what I think is stifling so many people's souls, Dan, is they literally are bored to death. We have so many toys and so many pleasures, but we're not happy. And people aren't willing to try new things because they think, well, that's not me. You can go do an art class, like we said just a minute ago. Oh, that's not me. I'm not doing a stupid art class. I'm a man. What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah. Like
and you went off to be a yoga instructor.
Yeah, my yoga thing is, I'd have never thought, never in a million world, never, would I have thought that would have been in my path someday.
So I hope you all will take some food out of that. It will help you on your path. If you have any questions or any comments, please send them to us on the comments below on the page here today, or to our website, our email. iam12recovery@gmail.com. iam12recovery@gmail.com. We will have a website eventually. I've got the domain name iam12.org, but we're finishing the book for everybody to do the 12 steps, and when that's out, you'll be the first to know. Just hang in there. We're in the final drafts, and we're trying to help everybody get these tools and have this life.
And this ought to be a great topic if you can open your mind to it a little bit, to think about something that you could send in and ask about. Hey, I'm doing this, and do you have any thoughts on where that might be coming from?
Great. And great topic to sit around and talk about over coffee with your friends. Say, I heard this crazy podcast. What do y'all think? That's crazy. Nothing controls me. Okay. All right. Well, now we're shift gears as we always do. We got a couple of great questions for you this week. So let's get into that section of the podcast next. Alrighty, here's where we head into our question portion of the podcast. Let's get right to it. 2 great questions. One's a short and sweet, and one's a little not as short as sweet. First question, how do you deal with really bad days? Alrighty. This is a fact of life for every person on the planet. How do you deal with? Do you deal with? Do we run away from? Do we get high? Do we just close the curtains and sleep it away? There's one thing I want to say that I'm very proud of in my recovery. I have learned to listen to myself, and I have learned to take care of myself. And it's one of my greatest gifts I love to pass on to my sponsees. We get here because we don't know how to take care of ourselves. We don't know how to attune to our own needs, and we don't know how to attend to our own needs. Instead, we let it build up and build up and build up, and then we have a blowout with drugs and alcohol, thinking that's going to make me happy, that's going to be a good time. So when these really bad days happen, first recognize that things aren't going well. And the reason why I'm starting here is because a lot of my friends, including myself, will push through. I'm just going to push through. I got things I got to do. I don't care. I got to get this stuff done. I got my list, and things aren't going right, but I'm going to push through, and usually it gets worse from there. I like first off the tool in the program about restarting your day. That's one of my favorite tools. And if you don't pray or if you don't meditate or / nap, you're going to miss out on the easiest way to do it. Because when I have a really hard day at work and I'm bombarded with a lot of negative, doom, dark energy all day long, because they're very sick, as Bill Wilson said, remember they are very ill. Before I can write and work on the book, I have to just take a moment and just turn everything off except for some white noise and just put on my incense and just let it go. Restart my day. And you can do that at any time. I remember many times in my early recovery, I would run to the bathroom to restart my day. I would just be like, I got to go. And I'd be like in there for 5 minutes, just be like, ah. All right, let's just restart. Let's let this day go. It sucked. Let's put a door on it. Doesn't mean the future and today has to be the same. Let's just put this bit to rest. Let's move forward. Because I got to tell you, once you get a bad day and a bad attitude going, you can actually perpetuate a worse day because you always draw that shit to you. It's like, oh, that's gone wrong. What else is going to happen? Oh, what's good, And then you create your own reality with a bad day. So restart your day is one of them. Number 2. Call your sponsor, call your sponsor, call your sponsor, call your sports. I have trained myself to the point where if anything negative is in my mind, in my body, or feeling like it's, I call my sponsor and dump it immediately. I don't want to carry it. I have a low tolerance for carrying it these days. Dan gets hit as soon as I get out of the brook some days. And I don't even know what I'm going to say. I just know I need to vent this stuff off of me because I don't want that energy. I don't want to bring it into my home. I don't want it to be around my loved ones. So I will just call my sponsor, vent, get it out. It's vital that you do that. Now, if it's a really awful, catastrophic day, you need to take care of your little kid inside. We had that episode about the inner child. And if you're not going to attend to the child's going to have a fit and attend to you. So please, I'm going to beg you, see what the child wants. Do you want to go home and just take a night off? Eat a bunch of bad food, watch some movies, have some fun, play some video games. Do you want to go out and see a movie? Do you want to go out with friends? Do you want to do something? Go to the game, something like that. But again, your adult mind will argue and say, but I've got work to do, or I don't really have the money to go and do that, or something like that. Don't do that to your little child. I'm telling you, if you ignore the bastard, he will get you. But listen, you've had a rough day. If you had a 4 or 5 year old child and came home in tears after school, would you not give it some milk and cookies? Would you not hug it and take care of it? Of course you would, but we don't do this for ourselves. So that is one thing I will take major credit for. I don't know. Perhaps my first sponsor, I got that from the way he treated himself gently. He had a gentle, soft way towards himself. I never saw him beat himself up, really. He had a sense of humor about himself, and he had great humility, but I never saw him down on himself. And so maybe that's where I got some of it that started to reprogram me from the damage my dad did. We talk about programming, damage my dad did to criticize me that you must always be tough and push through and not show any of those weak sides. But I have really done well in recovery to just listen and say, okay, I need to just pull away from the world. I need to do something for me. And fuck it. Now, it's fuck it in a healthy way. There is a difference. In the old days, I hit that button, I'm out to the liquor store or the dope man's house. But in a healthy way, it's alternatives, nourishing. Even if it's bad food, I just need to have something that's nourishing the little kid to make them feel okay for the night. And more often than not, if not every time, good night's sleep. Good night's sleep is a cure-all for everything. My good friend Dan can fall asleep at 7 at night. I can't remember the last time I ever did that unless I had the flu. But if you can do that, a good night's sleep, you'll be amazed, can just reset your whole brain, your whole focus on that. And another thing my good friend Dan does, and I'll let him speak here, is he just bolts off to the cabin. He has a job where literally he can just say, I'm just going hunting. I'm just going to the cabin. I need some cabin time. I have my own version of cabin time when I take off work as well. We'll talk about that maybe in a future podcast. But when you have a really bad day, I don't advise that you keep pushing. Take your foot off the accelerator pedal. Slow down. Let's ease through, get through the job. If you got to get your paycheck, get home without hurting anybody. And then take care of yourself. It's your time. Take care of yourself. what do you got to say about these really bad days? It's going to happen to all of us. I may have one tomorrow. Who knows you never can predict them.
No, you can't. I knew when that question come up that it'd be hard for me to add much to what you would say. Thankfully, I don't have a lot of bad days, and I sit and think I might have some bad moments, and because I use the tools, then that doesn't propagate into a bad day. But sometimes I've had some. I can think of my last bad day now that I think about it for a minute. When it seems like the world's attacking you, and it was from somebody else's energy, not mine. But that first thing, I like that saying. Man, I got to dump that energy. I like to say, dump the energy to the universe through safe people. Somebody who can understand what you're saying, like you said, your sponsor. But we're so fortunate that we've got a mile deep of guys that we can actually do that with. And what's cool, like even the Marco Polo app allows you to do that. You don't have to actually be speaking to anybody directly to make it happen. I mean, we can. That's the way most of ours happened. In my circle, I just can't talk on the phone with all these guys. Now, there's times when they say, "Hey, man, I need to talk," and we will. But to dump that energy first thing and yeah, look at what's got the rest of the day. Maybe you need to cancel something. Maybe like you said, taking care of your little kid or whatever. You're already having some bad day. Cancel the rest of the damn day and take care of you. Maybe you're supposed to go to some meeting tonight, or you're supposed to go do something family-wise tonight. Maybe tonight just ain't the day, man, and just have the boundaries up that say, hey, I'm just been a rough day. I'm taking the rest of it off.
And get to your safe place. I think recently I did that where it's like I just screw the grocery store. I'm just going home.
Yeah,
I'm just going home. I don't want to cause any damage in traffic or to some stranger. Let me just get home safely, and then close the door and lock it and just re-energize. That's that feeling, you know what I'm talking about. When you get in your own home and you close the door and you're like,
safe and protected.
I made it.
And I'll tell you, my naps are great for that, just as you said. It's not even necessarily, let's say, a bad day, but, sometimes the energy is just off, and it's, I don't know if I'd say it's a bad day, but, man, the TV station that's on at the moment ain't worth a shit, and I need to change the channel. And I can change that channel by taking a nap. That's a Bob Earl thing. He was hurt, and he woke up after a coma, and the first thing he said was, this channel is shit. Turn the channel.
That's awesome.
But yeah, change that. Do something. We can do things too, like you said, and I think it falls in line with your taking care of your little kid. There's things you can develop tricks to change the channel in your life. Sitting down, and if you like to play the guitar, everybody's got. You can develop something to change that channel in your life, and music will do it.
Mm-hmm.
Turn on some music that you jam to that really gets your heart beating and going, and something that you really, I've come to believe of music as a mood altering drug, in a good one, one that we can do. You can,
or if you tire of the constant stream of stress-inducing explosion, terrible pictures of bodies, and just the state of current television today, put on some old comedy, a little I Love Lucy or whatever the hell, just something silly. I was watching the Marx Brothers a few weeks ago, and I forgot how healing that was to just see slapstick, silly-ass humor that's just generally funny. You could show that to any population in the world, they'd be rolling because they would all get it. It's just funny. But nowadays, every movie or something has some sort of bend or take or agenda or something like that. And it's like, I just need some entertainment, and that's healthy, I believe, to do that for yourself. So when you said change the channel.
When I wasn't having a bad day today, but before whatever the YouTube, that word I can't say, throw me up a Johnny Carson clip, and it was like 20 minutes of Johnny Carson, Jack Lemmon, and Walter Matthau.
Oh, wow.
And
that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was.
Send that to me.
It was great. It was
Walter Matthau was a funny son of a bitch back in the day.
I wasn't looking for to change the channel, but between those three guys, man, it changed my, it uplifted me to listen to that, just 20 minutes of it.
Or get a buddy where you exchange short videos. Me and Shane send goofy ass funny videos to each other all day long, and sometimes it'll come right on target. Like I'm like, and I look down and I say, oh, he sent me something funny.
Yeah.
And it
change the channel.
Change the channel. Very good. I love that. All right, great question. Thank you for sending that in. Let's jump into question number 2 here. I have a question for the podcast and for y'all to put your thoughts on. You and Dan, great job. I've been having a tough, T-U-F-F, I've been having a tough time trying to decipher what my higher power wants me to do or is trying to tell me to do versus my will and what I want or think I should do. Now, I love this question. I would put an A+ on this question because A, it's one of the most common questions we will hear from our sponsees or from anybody new in the program. And B, there's no one simple answer. It's a deep question. We could do a whole podcast on that, but we won't do that. I'll keep it short. Anytime you're presented with a dilemma and you don't know what the answer is, flip it to the other side, either positive or negative, and sometimes from another angle it'll make more sense. So when I was first getting sober and I would come to my sponsor and say, I don't know what my higher power's will is, my sponsor would look at me and say, well, I think I know what your higher power's will of what they don't want you to do. And I said, what? And he said, use. And the obvious was right in front of me. And he said, because if you use, you're going to die, and then you're no good to your fucking higher power. So he said, that's higher power's will for you when you're starting out. That's all you need to worry about. Go to your meetings, work your program, because if you don't, you'll be dead, and then you're no good to God anyway. Now, I believe there's no such thing as turning your will and your life over in step 3 and just being done with it. It's a daily practice. It's something that you will go back and forth with. That is also confusing for a lot of newcomers. They think, well, I'm making this decision. That means I need to follow the path and be perfect. Well, Bill says there's no perfection in recovery, and there isn't. You're always going to have your self-will. You're always going to have your own choices. You're always going to have your own desires. And the idea is, where's the line between what I want or whether it's going to get me in serious trouble? So, and the old joke I used to have, like, you didn't hurt anybody, you didn't go to jail today, that's a good day in sobriety, okay? Especially earlier sobriety. So, a lot of times questioning this just sends you into a tail-chasing spin because, who really knows? But I do know what works for me, and that is in the general attitude I have towards the world, towards my decisions, towards other people, and whether or not I'm being humble and whether or not I'm being open. And I know when I've taken the power back and I'm starting to push too much and I'm starting to look at it's got to be my way, and then I'll go that little line and maybe start to try and control what somebody else is doing or change them in some way. And that's when I know I'm getting outside of higher power as well, and I'm starting to use Christopher's will, because I will actually get pushback, friction, and or just get that feeling in my gut like, it's not a good feeling, Then when I do let go and I try to align myself like, all right, you're running the show. I'm just here doing my part. I'll take care of my backyard. You take care of the rest. As Dan says, let God do the God, and I'll let Dan do the Dan. Then things start to flow and go easier, and I don't have that in my gut. So then I feel like, well, maybe that's my higher power's will because it's going easier and things are working for me. Doors are opening up. I'm getting the green lights, that kind of thing. I don't think higher power is going to dictate for you, you should go for this career or that career. It will open doors for you along the way, as Dan was talking about with his woodworking. But we have that right divinely to choose our own pathway in this life. Dan had a reading a long time ago from a guy, and I'm very dubious about any mediums and readings, and I've been around authentic angel whisperers, people that have the goods, and I've been around charlatans too. So I'm very dubious whenever I meet a new person. I'm always like, let's see what you got. And this guy said some key things to Dan that really made me go, I think this guy's got some goods on him. And he said, you've got this blueprint inside you that you're supposed to do certain things in this lifetime for your soul's advancement or growth, and maybe we'll do all this in a future podcast. But you have the right to deviate from your own blueprint because you have free will. So let's say in my blueprint, it was that I was going to become an alcoholic, which, to be honest with you, I feel like it was fated in many ways. I don't know how else I could have avoided it. But I could have decided not to get sober. I have free will. I could have driven that bus all the way into the grave, and higher power cannot stop me because I have that right of free will. That's where it gets tricky with this letting go. You think, well, God's going to come in and run me. No, you have to take care of your own responsibilities. You make your own decisions. I'm trying to align my will, have a partnership with my higher power. And that's when things tend to go the smoothest. I'm not a jellyfish where I just sit there and wait for God to do things. I have to get up and do things, put my clothes on, go to work. So talk to your sponsor, get their take on it, because I think everybody you would approach in the program would have their own angle. And anytime it's a specific thing, when it says here what my higher power wants me to do or trying to tell me to do, talk to your sponsor. We are tricky people who will fool ourselves that higher powers wants me to be with her. In fact, he sent her to the meeting tonight, and he sent her to sit right across from me, and I could see the light from heaven shone on her, and I could tell that's my future wife, and thank you, God. No, that's you doing all that. So be careful. We will fool ourselves about higher power will. Dan, you want to touch on this little thing about figuring out what the difference is between turning over your will and higher power's will and jazz like that?
Well, I know that as you practice this thing, that it's not always easier because you still have questions that it's tough to decide what you should be doing. But there's a thing, when he says jump into the stream of life, I usually have some, I can tell if this is flowing or not, and I think you led to it a little bit in a different way, but I don't always know what God's will is, but I get pretty firm no's, and that's the question mark between the maybes and the yeses is where the problem becomes of which one should I do. And as you said, your support and your sponsor are the people that can, because I don't see me that well. And I've heard some dumb ideas. I mean, some real dumb ideas that people go, I've been thinking about doing this. And I'm like, well, you could do that. But man, I'm telling you, my gut's saying that's not going to be a good thing to do. And your sponsors and your support group will be able to, a lot of times, be able to help you with that. Most of the time, these decisions, here's a different thing too, for a long time, I felt like issues had to be addressed right now. It was like the weasel pop-up game or whatever, whack-a-weasel or whatever, whack-a-mole, that I had to hit them. And one of the big things is to let it soak and give some time, and ask your higher power, for some guidance. And I think, we'll get in your gut. It might take days, might take weeks. But, the tough one is when a decision has to be made right now. That's when you got to do the old group conscious thing and get some people's ideas on it and see maybe even in a group setting to say, hey, and that's kind of one of the things that happens with our Discord. Somebody will have something going on in their life and they'll throw it in there, and the group can offer opinions on that stuff and come out. I've rarely seen the decision. And it's not always like the answer, but at least a general theme and the direction of where to go, and some options. It seems to always work out well. That group conscious is a magic tool we have. Really is. I had a shaman on the Spiritual Underground podcast the other day, and I actually 2 women that day, and both of them used this word saying this stuff was happening like magically, and it almost is magic when you follow, when you're working a program. I think the answer will come. I think you'll get it if you just use the tools. And
so let's be clear. If you're in early recovery, what works best, and it worked for me, my sponsor is my determiner of will in terms of what I should be doing and why. Not because I'm a robot and he's going to just control me, but because I want what he has. And to get what he has, I got to do what he did. So if my sponsor's saying go to meetings, do all that, that is turning it over. That is letting go and getting out of the driver's seat and letting someone else run the show. And someone who's not an idiot, as I heard Bob D say that his sponsor, he said, well, why would I want to let go to God? And they said, well, at least we know an idiot won't be in charge of your life. An idiot that's trying to kill you. And that made him laugh, and he could get that, okay? So keep it simple at first. I will tell you, the longer you're sober, you get these little, you got to meditate. You got to take time for reflection. You got to listen. You got to be self-reflective.
You got to get quiet.
You got to be quiet. And I'm telling you, you get these just guidelines. And somebody could come to me now and say, well, why are you so dedicated to finishing this book and doing this deal with trying to provide recovery for everybody? When who knows if the world wants it? I don't. It may be a complete disaster. It's been successful here in Louisville. Maybe the world doesn't want it. All I can tell you is that it just feels like I'm supposed to be doing this. And it's not something that's going to harm me. It's not something that's going to get me drunk. It's not something that's going to hurt anybody else. So those are some pretty clear guidelines. When you said firm no's,
Yep.
usually the firm no's are around like, nah, you're going to hurt somebody if you do that. You know, don't screw that guy's wife. You know?
I get nudges from above in my work life. You know, I do. I know the other day I had somebody who was 45 minutes or more away, and I usually wouldn't drive that far, but something was telling me go do that job. Mm-hmm. And I get to go, and I go, and it's this daggone rock star is home I'm getting to work in, you know, and which was cool to me, super cool that ended up happening. And I'll get the opposite too. I'll be on the phone or even just a vibe from a text that says, nope, that person is not your client. And I'll come up with some reason why I can't do their job.
It becomes a working part of the mind, as Bill says in the book. And that conscious contact, you just have to practice it. It's also saved me from, you don't have to respond. You don't have to act. Like you said, wait. I get these texts sometimes where I feel like my old programming, I got to defend myself. I got to react. I got to say something. It's like, no, just put it down. Leave it alone. Let them sit with that energy. It's not your energy. Power shit, man. That is powerful stuff. But again, it's practicing these tools. You just practice it longer, and that's a guarantee that your spirituality will grow and you'll get a stronger connection with your higher power. The steps will bring that to you the most. So 2 ways to get it. Do them yourself. Take other people through them. And that's the part most people fail on. They don't turn around and pass it on to the next guy, and they're missing stronger contact with their higher power, because your higher power will show up to help you guide this other person for sure. All right. Like I said, deep questions, great questions. Appreciate them. Please send us any issues in your life. I will talk about your dog, what to name your dog. I will help you with anything you got. And it's free, and we will never out you. I didn't mention any names. You know, it's totally anonymous. So send them to Iam12recovery. I got it. Iam12recovery@gmail.com. Please, we would love to hear from you, even if it's just comments on the podcast or anything we can help you with. We want to get you happening and get you happy with your life. All right. Well, thank you for joining us this week. We don't hit you with this hard on this, but whatever you can do to like, subscribe, or comment, please help us out. We are not evolving in our analytics, and nobody knows we exist. And there's a lot of people out there that could use these tools. So post it on your Facebook page, pass it on to a friend, just send it in a text. Hey, this was cool. Check this out. And help us out so that the rest of the world can get this love. Well, thanks for being here. We end the podcast every week in the same way with the Serenity Prayer. So if you would like to join us at home, please feel free. And the Serenity Prayer, Dan. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Just for today. Keep coming back. It works if you work it, and you die if you don't. Woohoo! Keep coming back. We'll see you next time. We love you. Bye-bye now.